there. So you guys do know that George Galloway, he did win his race, and he's already using his voice in the UK Parliament. He is already clapping back, I guess, at Rishi Sunak, who's the Prime Minister of the UK. And he was very loud and vocal about this in front of everyone. And I wish we had this type of representative here in our Congress in the United States. But I want to show you this. This is in reference to Rishi Sunak's pro-Israeli bias on the conflict with Iran. So this is really interesting. George Galloway stands up and basically hands Richie's ass to him, to be honest. And this happens multiple times throughout this discussion. Let's go into this clip here, and then we are going to bring up part of this conversation that George Galloway actually recently had with Scott Ritter that also ties into this as well. You have to remember, again, Rishi Sunak, a corporate shill, friends of Obama, apparently. Remember, Obama came and paid him a visit. Remember this? This happened recently. So he's who the corporate, elite, they actually want in power. He's also pretty wealthy himself. The military industrial complex backs this guy as well. That's who they want there. So when George Galloway won, and he won through the Workers' Party, Rishi Sunak came out publicly and spoke against it, because that was a realization for Rishi, that your time's probably about to be up, son. You're probably not going to win your re-election if George Galloway just won, because the people have spoken. So let's go ahead and get into this here.
There was not one single word in the Prime Minister's statement of condemnation of the Israeli destruction of the Iranian consulate in Damascus.
Well, we've called for restraint before. We called for restraint with regard to the attack on Gaza, yet the indiscriminate bombing took place. We called for restraint on the settlements in the West Bank, and yet the settlements have expanded. We called for restraint so that food could be got to the children of Gaza, and yet malnutrition is killing some of them. So what action will the government take if Israel does not show restraint?
Suella Bratham.
Mr. Speaker, please accept my condolences on the loss of your father.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, I was in Israel at the northern border with Lebanon. And of course, we've all seen what happened this weekend. But since October the 7th, Iran-backed Hezbollah has fired over 4,000 rockets into northern Israel, displacing over 150,000 Israeli civilians.
Notice that she said she was in Israel. She wasn't in Gaza.
I met some of those families. They're under siege. They've been uprooted, but they are brave and defiant in the face of terrorism and anti-Semitism. Mr. Speaker, we have known for years that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is the world's chief sponsor of terrorism.
Hear, hear.
Funding and promoting terrorist plots, radicalization and hostage-taking, both in the Middle East and at home. Mr. Speaker, we have proscribed Hamas. We have proscribed Hezbollah. Prime Minister, why don't we put the UK's national security first by now prescribing the IRGC?
Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady knows, that we don't comment on any potential prescription decisions, but of course we recognise the threat from Iran and have taken measures to counter it at home and around the world. I obviously refer her to my previous answer, but I'm confident the police, security services and courts all have the tools that they need to sanction, prosecute and mitigate the threats from Iran. We've strengthened.
Someone said in the chat, it might have been Eric, someone said, is this the UK's AOC?
Our sanctions regime recently, and including sanctioning the IRGC in its entirety.
Rushanara Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the calls for a ceasefire here in our Parliament and across the international community, the war in Gaza has raged, costing 33,000 lives, as well as the 1,200 killed by Hamas attacks, and a humanitarian catastrophe that is now turning to a famine. For months, many have raised the spectre of the concern around regional escalation. Can the Prime Minister say more about precisely what conversations he's having with the leading figures in the Israeli government, as well as through various parties to influence the Iranian regime to de-escalate as quickly as possible, given the seriousness of the crisis.
So what's interesting to me about these meetings or at least I found interesting, is that notice how they have to face each other. It's like you have to look each other in the face. So you have a group on one side and a group on the other side. It's really interesting to me. Could you imagine, like, if our Congress was actually set up that way, where the Republicans were on one side and the Democrats were on one side, and they had to face each other, look at each other in the face the whole time?
Well, both the Defence Secretary and Foreign Secretary have spoken to their counterparts over the weekend, including the Foreign Secretary has spoken to the Iranian Foreign Minister specifically to urge de-escalation and condemn what happened over the weekend. I'm speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu shortly, and I can reassure her and all members of the House that we will continue, together with our allies, to urge calm heads to prevail and de-escalation. We think that's the right course forward, and as I said, across all levels of government, that's the message that we will taking to everyone.
Ben Wallace.
So I just want to mention something here. So notice again, he said he spoke to Netanyahu, right? Is he speaking to leaders of Iran? Is he speaking to people in Gaza? No, he's not. See, this is another thing. Like, we need to call for de-escalation, which I think we need to get rid of all these wars altogether. But he is leaving out the fact that Israel was the one who was the aggressor. They are the ones that provoked Iran. And from what I've been reading, seems like they've been provoking them for quite some time, right? So again, it's just like, you cannot sit here and say that it all started on October 7th and blame it on Hamas, but you're not willing to at the same time say it all started when Israel, bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus. If you're willing to overlook that as well. Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is another country that is under almost constant daily bombardment by Iranian-made drones. That country is Ukraine. Some 3 years ago, I pleaded with the Israelis to help Ukraine against Russia, and they refused, even though Russia was spending $500 million in the Iranian drone program.
They refused because they are not interested in helping anyone but themselves. That's why they refuse. So get this, folks. Israel didn't even want to help Ukraine. But U.S. government just kicks out billions of dollars to Zelensky.
I know the Prime Minister is speaking to the Prime Minister of Israel later today. Now that RAF pilots have quite rightly gone to the defense of Israel, could he perhaps ask that Israel now decides that it is time to help Ukraine in their hour of need, and we can see off both Russia and Iranian aggression?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for the role he's played in ensuring UK security and that of our allies over previous years. He's right, as my statement alluded to as well. The Ukrainians are suffering from Iranian drones over the same weekend that this happened. And I'm also pleased, not only will I take up his points of always with all our allies, urging them to do more to support Ukraine. I know.
Pause. So I want to show you again the difference between the way they treat the Ukrainians and the Palestinians, because when it comes to Ukraine, he can say that the Ukrainians are suffering. When it comes to the Palestinians, like, yes, there's a humanitarian need in Gaza, but we all have to remember this all started with October 7th and want to ignore the entire history of everything that led up to October 7th. The amount of compassion and empathy that they show for the Ukrainian people versus the zero compassion that they show for the Palestinian people, it's very telling. And they expose to you again that one group of people is considered to be more valuable to them than the other group of people. John Kirby has done this as well.
he will have welcomed the recent announcement a few weeks ago of more support from the UK to Ukraine, specifically in the areas of uncrewed platforms on autonomous warfare, to make sure that the Ukrainians both have the ability they need to protect themselves and conduct their operations. And the majority of the 10,000 new platforms that we are delivering to the Ukrainians will have been developed in the UK, which I know is something that he was keen to ensure that we saw the benefits of here at home. I'm glad that has been realised, supporting Ukraine in their security and bolstering the British defence industry here at home.
Supporting the Ukrainians in their security, they all get on board for that, but they don't support the Palestinian people having any type of security or being able to defend their self. Remember, Gaza does not have a military. They do not support Gaza being able to defend their self, but they support Ukraine being able to do so. What a mess. We're going to fast forward to the part where George Galloway appears again. Hold on. I think it's right after. Oh, okay, yeah. So let me play this Rishi. I keep saying Richie. This Rishi part here.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of settler violence in the West Bank is something that I have personally repeatedly raised with Prime Minister Netanyahu, as indeed have my colleagues, including the Deputy Foreign Minister, and we have joined with allies in sanctioning activity of particular individuals where it has been brought to our attention, and we will continue to ensure that the Israeli government does everything it can to reduce tensions in the West Bank. We don't think it's conducive to long-term peace in the region.
Reduce tensions in the West Bank. How about eliminate tensions within the West Bank? And you do that by stopping Israeli settlers and the IDF from taking Palestinians' homes in the West Bank. You wouldn't have this tension in the West Bank if Israeli settlers were not kicking Palestinian people out of their homes or setting their homes on fire. What do you mean reduce the tension? What? He says it like it's a headache. You know, take an aspirin. You'll feel a little bit better. No, it's they need to get out of there. They have no business being there. The settlements are illegal. They're against international law. They shouldn't be there at all. There is no reduce the tensions. The Israeli settlers should not be there. They should not build any more settlements. And the settlements that they have taken over, and by the way, it doesn't even have to be them. American Israelis can go there and do that. The settlements that they have taken from the Palestinian people need to be returned. That's how you get rid of all the tension. Reduce the tensions.
And that's why I said we've taken action where we can, as well as being very explicit about our concerns with the Israeli government.
George Galloway.
Mr. Speaker, I knew your father well for a very long time. He was a fine man, and I am sincerely sorry for your loss. There was not one single word in the Prime Minister's statement of condemnation of the Israeli destruction of the Iranian consulate in Damascus.
And this is what we need in our Congress. Because you see, the representatives that we have in Congress, even the ones that call themselves progressive, they're not willing to do this. Rishi, he's the prime minister. He's the prime minister. Look at how George Galloway just spoke to the prime minister. We don't have one person that is willing to do what George Galloway is doing. Not one. Don't tell me AOC. Don't tell me Cori Bush. Not one. At the end of the day, they all cave.
Which is the proximate reason for the event everyone is here in concert condemning. He was not even asked to do so by the front bench opposite. Kay Burley is the only person so far to demand that of a government minister. We have no treaty with Israel, at least not one that Parliament has been shown. And the Iranians are not likely to listen to him. When Britain occupied Iran, looted its wealth, and overthrew its one democratic socialist government in my own lifetime.
Oh, there's an uproar there. There's an uproar there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, whatever may have happened a few weeks ago, it is absolutely no justification for launching more than 300 drones and missiles from one sovereign state towards Israel.
Pause. But there was that justification for Israel to demolish Gaza in response to October 7th. Because that's what Rishi Sunak was totally fine with that, with the way that Israel responded. Until there was pressure from the protesters, he was totally fine with that, with the way that Israel responded. The response was Israel has a right to defend itself. But apparently nobody else does. Someone should make a t-shirt that said Israel has a right to defend itself, but apparently nobody else does. Do you see how they reveal who they are? This wealthy prime minister does not have the interests of the American people, the working class people, the UK people. He doesn't have their best interests at hand. People will tell you he wasn't elected. He doesn't have their best interests at hand. He comes from money. He represents money. He protects corporate interests and the military industrial complex. And that is why he's in that seat. Nobody else has the right to defend themselves.
It's as simple as that. And in the honourable gentleman's question, not once did he condemn that action, or indeed the actions of Hamas in the region. There is no equivalence between these things whatsoever, and to suggest otherwise is simply wrong.
Robert Holford. Very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for his strong support for the state of Israel. Last year, as Israel and Saudi Arabia were about to strike a transformational agreement, Iran-backed Hamas carried out its massacre on October the 7th.
You see all this? All these people are bought. You see how all these people are bought and paid for, and now they bring up Hamas and all that stuff. It's a mess. Now, I want to fast forward to the discussion that George Galloway had with Scott Ritter about this. Iran gave one of the greatest military displays in recent history. Listen to this, because George Galloway, again, he hosts the mother of all talk shows. So he's a host, but he's also a politician. But notice the difference, like the same rhetoric that he has on his show, he has no problem saying those things to the prime minister's face. No problem saying that. When he was interviewed after he won, he had no problem saying that he despised the prime minister. You can't find one member of the squad that's willing to tell you that today. Not one of them. Even if they're pissed at Joe Biden, they're not willing to say, I'm very upset with Joe Biden. I despise Joe Biden. Not one of them are willing to do it because they're all simps. They're paid, they're corporate, and they all gave in to Democrat leadership so that they can further their careers. You got AOC out here giving money to the DCCC so that she can further her career. The money doesn't have to come from her. The money can come from anyone else. That's her looking out for herself. We don't have not one of them that has the guts to say what George Galloway said to the prime minister's face. Listen to what Scott Ritter says about Iran here.
Well, simply put, what happened is that the Iranian government has established a publicly discernible policy on deterrence. They have let Israel know, and not just Israel, they have let the United States and every other nation within missile range know that there will be a heavy price to be paid if you attack Iranian soil. That Iran will not tolerate the kind of attack that took place on the 1st of April, where Israel attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus. And I believe Iran is also putting a marker on the table that says Iran will no longer tolerate the kind of actions such as the assassination of nuclear scientists on its soil by Israel in the past. This will not be tolerated. That in the future, if you choose to attack Iran, Iran will retaliate and they will retaliate with the kind of force that cannot be interdicted and the kind of force that will destroy that which is seeking to destroy. Now, the Iranians were very clever in creating this posture, in that all they had to do was show a proof of concept. I think a lot of people were saying, well, they didn't destroy an airfield, they didn't destroy an Israeli headquarters, they didn't kill hundreds or thousands of Israelis. They weren't intending to. They were simply letting the Israelis and the Americans know that we have the capacity to destroy an airfield. All the Israelis have to do is look at a map, look where the Iranian missiles hit, and understand that the Iranians hit that which they were aiming at, and there was nothing Israel could do to stop those missiles from reaching their target. And Israel is the most heavily defended airspace in the world, with the most sophisticated anti-missile technology deployed in depth, and they couldn't stop the Iranian missiles. So the signal to the United States, which lacks this comprehensive air defense umbrella over its installations in the Middle East, is there too, but for the grace of God go you, if you choose to attack us or facilitate an Israeli attack. So this was, I call it one of the greatest military demonstrations in modern history, because by doing what they did, Iran not only put Israel into check, but believe it or not, they have created a foundation for peace and stability in the Middle East by eliminating from consideration options that Israel and the United States may have been considering down the road, such as a preemptive strike against Iranian nuclear facilities or a punishing attack against the Iranian regime. The United States and Israel are now on notice that if they attempt to do something like that, the price they will pay will be prohibitively high. In the case of Israel, it might be terminally high.
So notice he said there to send a message, right? Have you ever had someone try to send you a message, right? It's like they didn't destroy you, but they kind of put out the little, a little bug out there for you to check yourself. To check yourself, right? I've seen this happen before with relationships. You may have seen this happen. Maybe you were part of one of those relationships and you were one of the people that it happened to, right? But I've seen women do this with their husbands. When I was in college, when I was waiting tables at the Olive Garden, I remember some of the women that would come in with their husbands, like some of them were just like totally chill, but some of them were mean. And they would honestly like check their husbands in front of other people. And I remember one time I was waiting on this one table and it was a couple. And for whatever reason, this woman, I don't know what the deal was, but she didn't, I guess, allow her husband to talk to other women. And I don't mean talk to other women as if like trying to date them or ask them out. I mean, seriously, just speak to other women, period. So like if you went to their table and said, and what would you like to get to order? He will have a sweet tea. I'm like, whoa, what is happening here? And so I had this couple multiple times, more than one time, right? And so they were regulars. And every time, like she would not let this guy speak. It was the weirdest thing. So anyway, one time I remember I came to the table. I think she was in the restroom. And so I asked, oh, will you be having like your usual 2 sweet teas? And he looked up and said, well, yeah, she came in, was right behind me. And she sat down and she said, he'll have a sweet tea and I'll have an unsweet tea. And I said, okay, great. Thanks. So I start to walk back towards the kitchen and I overhear her say to him, don't let me embarrass you in front of all these people. Whoa. So it was one of those moments. So that was an example of her trying to check him. So she didn't flat out embarrass him in front of everyone, but she let him know that if he, I guess, spoke to a woman again, she was going to embarrass him in front of all those people. Now that was ridiculous. There are some women that are like that. I got a lot of stories to tell you from when I used to wait tables. We can talk about this all night. We can talk about it all night. Okay. I'm telling you. But yeah, sending a message. Now I want to go to the second part of that interview there as well. And I want to go ahead and pick up right about here.
But do you agree with me that, as George W. Bush might put it, they've all misunderestimated Iran all along?
Well, again, the military has it. I have to say that I've worked with Israeli intelligence, with their technical intelligence people, with the people who do the analysis and the assessments of missiles. These are smart people. And if I, sitting here thousands of miles away without any access to secret information, could have said I knew most of this going in before this happened. I knew what Iranian capabilities were. I can guarantee you they knew exactly what this was. But the problem is getting their voice heard by Israeli policymakers who are driven by emotion and by politics, domestic politics, etc. What this attack did is empower their voices, because now, whereas political leaders could say, well, you're just speculating, you don't know, that's just geeky intelligence stuff. Now they have the hard data. The photograph put on the table, the air defense guys saying, boss, we gave it our best shot. There was nothing we could do to stop them. The Americans calling up saying, there's nothing more we can do. We did everything. We can't stop this. And now the Israeli politicians are waking up to the harsh reality that the fiction that they have been living under is not even close to reality. It was a fantasy, and there's a real world out there, and it's a dangerous world, and they're going to have to change the way that they operate.
And Scott Ritter would know, right? Because, he was an intelligence officer. He's been in that region. He's been on the show before. He's very knowledgeable about what happens in that region. And I think, Iran basically sent a wake-up call to Israel. I think Israel would be completely foolish to respond to Iran. But, they've done other foolish things, so you never know. But I would sincerely hope that they would not respond to that. Just let it go. It's interesting. Even Glenn Greenwald had to say, not Glenn Greenwald, excuse me. Biden had to say, let it go. even Biden had to say, just let it go or whatever. But I think that when you see someone like George Galloway, and I don't know how much longer he will be on the show. I have to look that up. Someone told me, will he still be able to do the show now that he's in political position? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how the rules are in the UK, so I have to look that up. But I will say that it just goes to show you, that's what we wanted from the squad. That's what we expected from them, that same type of energy and that same type of fire. And Rishi Sunak knew that was how George Galloway was going to be. And that's why he released a statement after George Galloway won, I guess, to try to turn the public against him. But obviously that did not work. The people have spoken. People voted for him for a reason, right? Let's go to some of the comments here. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. Don't forget to like, sub, and share with your friends and your fam. Some of these comments, I'm already laughing about. I'm already laughing at some of these comments. Marvin says, Sabby, do you order food for your hubby when you go out? LOL. Oh, God, no. I never understood that. The women who would do that, I didn't understand. Why would you? Are you his mom? Leroy says, I wonder if Sabby would be able to interview George or get on his show. I've been on his show before. I can try to do interview. I know he's really busy, but I can try to reach out. Thank you for the super sticker, Debs. And thank you for the super sticker, J Legend. J Legend sounds like the name of a musician. J Legend back in action. Album 3. Monique says Gigi is trying to get Richard Medhurst to run for parliament with the Workers' Party. Holy smokes. That would be awesome, man. I'll have to look into that. Lance says we want more stories. Oh, my God. Oh, man. That'll have to be a call-in segment or something. Marcel says need a whole episode of Sabby restaurant stories. I have some stories. I could write a vlog about it. Arcane said women be like that if you let them. Why? It was always weird to me. When I would see that happen, I'm like, are you afraid of this woman? Troy said she put a hex on that man. I put a spell on you because you're mine.